Well, good morning, good day, good evening, good night, wherever you dialing in. I appreciate you dialing in for another one of our videos. We are looking at Numbers and Deuteronomy, session 3. This is titled The Land. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the land. As we've seen in the last last two sessions, God has established his authority. God has told them what to do, when to move, and when to pack up, and when to settle down. And he's also instructed Moses. We saw that he dealt with a rebellious generation through Moses, and also designed it to where Moses would have help with this rebellious generation. So now we're moving forward based on those premises. So we're looking at just to give you an understanding of the context, as the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness of Paran, God instructed Moses to send them to Canaan to scout out the land. We see that. Of course, we're looking at Numbers 13. The plan called for sending one man from each tribe so the entire nation could have been represented. Verses 4 or 15 list the names who were chosen, 10 mentioned here in the Bible. Sadly, the Bible records the Lord later struck down for their lack of faith. The two faithful men, Caleb and Hosea, which would become Joshua, would play an important role in the conquest and settlement of the land. So yeah, now we're getting down to brass tacks. We're getting down to business. Okay, so God is sitting there at the starting line saying, "Okay, guys, let's go." Right? And Moses is like, "Okay, all right, guys, we're here. We need to scout it out, and we need to develop a plan." It's not that they didn't trust God, but at the same time, they had to make some planning. You know, they had to look at their enemy and get an idea of what they were facing, and kind of going forward from there. So we're going to get into the lesson. We're going to talk about that. First question: what was the last project you had that was more complicated than you thought it would be? Wow. So it's funny that question should come up because obviously when I do work around the house, something always pops up. So if I'm thinking I'm building extending onto my deck, well, guess what? I may find some rotted wood on my old deck. And I'm working on my bathroom now, and what I thought would be a simple process, I get in there and it turns out to be a little bit more complicated. So, but nonetheless, I enjoy facing those challenges and going from there. And those are just small instances that pop in my mind. You may have greater ones. You may have a project in relation to your family, or dealing with a family member or something like that. And it's not necessarily a project as it is just working with one another with communication and planning or something like that. So something to think about. Anyway, so let's get into Numbers 13, 17, 20. So we've done established that the spies were selected, and now Moses is going to give them instructions. When Moses sent them out to scout in the land of Canaan, he told them, "Go up this way to the Negev, then go up into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, or few or many. Is the land they live in good or bad? Are the cities they live in camped or fortifications? Is the land fertile or unproductive? Are there trees in it or not? Be courageous. Bring back some fruit of the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes." So we probably think, late summer or early fall, somewhere around there, middle to late summer, that this was taking place. So there would be some harvest or some fruit or some kind of crop that would be available at this time. Now, obviously, if they go during the winter or the spring, it'd be hard to tell what the crops or what the land would look like in that regard. So, all right, so looking at this, so you got Moses is giving them clear instructions. It's not that he doesn't trust God. It's worth it to kind of plan, to get ahead, get an idea of what you're facing is what he's looking for. And he gave them specific instructions. Look at the land, look at the people. Are there a lot? There's a few, or Are they fortifications? I mean, they got to look at all this stuff before they move forward. Because again, we're not talking about an army of like 500 people. We're talking about a nation of people moving forward. So there's got to be some logistics taking into effect. Okay, that's the most important thing. Moses is looking at it from a logistics part. He's trying to get some idea of what's going on. So let's read some of the notes. Moses gave the men 12 men specific instructions on how to go about their business. Scout the land, gather and bring back. The purpose of sending scouts to determine how, not if, Israel would enter the land. God would provide the victory. Yes, I've already discussed that. So also look at this. In addition to scouting the terrain and geography, Moses wanted the spies to examine the people in their cities. He wanted to know if they're strong, weak. He understood that God will provide the victory. Battles and real advantages would be fought. The nature of the Canaanite encampments and fortification would determine Israel's military strategy. The first term referred to the population centers and typically were open country where residents lived in tents. In theory, what such settlements would be easier to conquer. Cities, fortified walls would require more effort. So yeah, it wasn't like the Israelites were just going to cross over into the land and God would take care of everything. No, there had to be some planning, logistics, as I talked about, and God would, help and He would bless those efforts. Okay, it's not like God would sit back, but He wasn't going to part the Red Sea or, strike. Just come and strike and take everybody down. No, the Israelites had to participate in that as well. He was going to bless their efforts. Very important for us to keep that in mind. And Moses knew that. Question: what do you imagine the spies were thinking while Moses explained the information he wanted to bring back? What would cause them to be afraid? Well, the unknown would be afraid, as we sometimes know. The unknown is just that. It's unknown. It could be very intimidating, or it could be nothing at all. But we don't know until we get on that road, right? So I think that what were they thinking? I'm sure there was a curiosity, and of course, going with 11 other countrymen into this to spy on the land would probably embolden that individual a little bit more. But at the same time, there could be, in my opinion, looking at Caleb and Joshua, there's probably a little bit more excitement, right? You kind of get a feel that you're on the cusp of the promises God made to my forefather and Abraham, right? So you're right there. I mean, we're getting ready to come into this land and take what God promised our forefather. Right? And this active God that's been with us throughout this whole journey still has our back and we're still moving forward. Now, that's probably Caleb and Joshua. I don't know about the other 10. The other 10 were probably thinking that they were thinking logically. But again, I think there probably was a little bit of excitement in regards to, hey, we're here. We're going to go in. Now, they may have thought they can just walk in and take the land and other people would leave seeing this army coming. I don't know. But again, I think there's some excitement, obviously, from 2, and probably more curiosity and intimidation from the other 10 because of the unknown. The spy's character really would come out in the days to come. So now, moving on to 21 to 25, verse 21, 25 of 13, chapter 13. Say they went up and scouted out the land of the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob near the entrance of Hamath. They went through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Iman, Shesai, and Talmai and the descendants of Anak were living. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they came to the Eshcol Valley, they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, which were carried by poles by 2 men. They also took some pomegranates and figs. That place was called Eshcol Valley because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from their scouting of the land. Okay, so this part, the land assess, Moses is kind of getting an idea of where they went throughout the trip. Okay, so 40 days, there's a lot of ground that can be covered in 40 days. And I think that's the most important thing. Somewhere in here, I saw that they had covered probably about 300 miles. That's a lot of miles. Now, nowadays, we tend to drive, but you got to think of a city that'd be 300 miles from here, right? From where your location is. That's pretty impressive, all the walking that they had to do and all the traveling for 40 days. It's pretty wild. Now, yeah. Anyway, so they were instructed to bring some of this stuff back, and they did. Okay. Now, looking at some of the notes around Hebron, the spies also caught first glimpse of enemies. They would face the descendants of Anak, known as Anakim. And I did a video on them, a little bit more detailed in regards to that. You can check it out. So they saw them, and of course they think, wow, these guys must be the descendants of the Nephilim. That's what they thought. Now keep that in mind. It's not what that, and the Anakites were not descendants of the Nephilim because God wiped them out in the flood. But they thought, wow, these guys are so tall and so big. Yeah, they must be who they are. They were intimidated by these men. Now, what does that say about the Israelites? Were they a bunch of 4 to 5 foot men, and the Anakites were 5.5, 6.5 foot men? Who knows? But anyway, they were still intimidated by that. So moving on, we're looking at these notes. The cluster served as proof that God was faithful in His promise. Unfortunately, the people with amazement would overcome fears and doubts planted in the hearts by the 10 spies. Yeah. So the thing that you had a cluster of grapes carried back by 2 men, and people would see this, and it was proof of God's blessing. It was proof of what God promised, and so they're coming back after all of them are coming back, not just some of them. All 12 are coming back, and with it, they're bringing back proof that God is going to give them what's promised. Wow, so that's important. So, okay, so they come back. Now, let's look at some. We'll move forward here in a second. Question: how do we balance acting in faith and gathering information before acting? I'm always been a cautious person when it comes to certain things. I don't know about you. I'm not one of these to make a decision right off the bat, knee-jerk decisions or anything like that. I try not to. I try to get all the facts before making a decision. Obviously, when it comes to money or anything that I have, such as a vehicle or a job or something like that, I try to be very observant. I try to gather as much information and pray about it and make a decision and go from there. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes you have to make a decision right away. And if you do and you have to make a decision, then so be it. But for me, for the most part, I try to cautiously get into, look at those situations and go from there. I'm just not one to make a decision and bam, go with it and run with it. That's just not me. All right, so let's look at the last part. Let's look at the outcome. Let's look at the result of what's going on here. So Numbers 13, 26, 31. The men went back to Moses, Aaron, and the entire Israelite community in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. So we know where they are. They came back, all 12 men, not just to Moses, not to Moses and Aaron and the 70. No, they came back to everybody. So everybody is I can see these guys getting up on a rock or a cliff or a table and just surrounded with, hundreds of thousands of people. Because again, this is a small nation, which, some scholars put between 200 to 400,000 people. It's a lot of people, right? So they're coming back. Moving on. They brought back a report for them and the whole community, and they showed them the fruit of the land. Okay, so these guys come back. They're right in front of everybody, in front of God and all their people, and they have proof of God's blessing, proof of God's promise. Okay? Moving forward, they reported to Moses, We went into the land where you sent us. It is indeed flowing with milk and honey, and there is some fruit. However, here's where the problems kick in. However, people living in the land are strong, and the cities are large and fortified. We also saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites were living in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live by the sea and along the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people in the presence of Moses, said, let's go up now to Jordan. He's ready to go. So he's talking about this. Let's go up now, take possession of the land, because we can certainly conquer it. But the men who had gone up with him responded, we can't attack the people because they are stronger than we are. Wow. So very disappointing. Okay. On many reasons. Now, it's one thing to be disappointed based on a lack of knowledge and saying we can't move forward because we don't have enough information. However, they have proof right there that they showed their people that God's promise was right across the road. It's right there. We just got to go take it. And Caleb was the one that said, let's go. Let's take it. He's all for it. Him and Joshua were ready for war. They were ready to go in and take what God promised them. But the other 10 were like, nah, we can't. They're stronger than us. They were pretty much saying, there's no way God's going to help us. No wonder God got mad. God was really upset after that. And this is why, they spent another 40 years in the desert because of their lack of faith, extreme lack of faith. And it wasn't because, again, not because of lack of information. It's because they had the proof of God's blessing and God's promise right there in front of them. And yet they still doubted God. Wow, it's amazing. Looking at some of these notes here, the scouts returned to camp. The location would later become as Judah's southern border. As instructed, they offered the report to the whole community. Again, no one was left out. They shared information about the geography, population, along with visual evidence of fruit of the land. Still, fear dominated the scouts' report. In a nutshell, they thought the Canaanites would be more than Israel. The Israel God could handle. Again, they thought, well, no, we're going to lose. And we don't want to take a chance of losing. They stressed the large and fortified cities, focused on the obstacles rather than God's promise. Yes, they were focused on the obstacles ahead of them rather than God's promise to lead them to victory. It's kind of like, when we step out of the boat in the middle of the storm. We keep our eyes on Jesus, we're going to be okay. The moment we see the storm around us, we start falling into the water. Same thing here. These people were so sad. I mean, the 10 spies, and of course the everyone around them, the whole Israelite community, were focused on the storm. They were focused on the fortifications. They were focused on this. They never saw these people. So the spies come back and say they are bigger than us. They're descendants of the Nephilim. Well, of course, exaggeration over centuries, time passes. They probably thought these people were 10 stories high. They were giants in the land. They want to crush them with their feet. So that fear was contagious. And that's what upset. It'd be one thing if the 10 spies returned to just Moses and Aaron. But no, their fear infected the whole community. He just had enough of that. After all that they've been through, after all they've seen that God provided for them, rescued them, parted the Red Sea, his presence among them day and night, they still doubted. And God said, I've had enough of you guys. So anyway, so looking at this, Caleb and Joshua were the only scouts who believed the people should go and conquer the land. They had seen all the same challenges the other spies saw. However, they focused on God's promise rather than human logic or circumstances. Unfortunately, the negative report of 10 spies resonated with the people. The fear overwhelmed their faith. Yes, sometimes we fall in that. Sometimes we're of the 10 spies, and sometimes we're of the 2 spies. Sometimes we're like Joshua and Caleb, and we're going to say, God's behind us, let's move forward, and let's get it done. But how often sometimes we're one of the 10 spies? We know the facts before us. We know God's going to have our backs based on what he has delivered us from in the past, yet we still hesitate. We just do. I'm always kind of person looking, how am I going to apply this to my life? And that's what it is. We need to trust God. Even when we have all the facts and we have proof of his blessing, let's not hesitate. Let's move forward with what he has planned for us, because what he has planned for us is ultimately good for us. Question: what kind of obstacles prevent or delay us from obeying God? Good question. Let's talk about that come Sunday morning. What kind of obstacles might prevent or delay us from obeying God? The biggest thing is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of stepping out on that faith. Fear. Fear is the biggest thing, I believe. What's your answer? So sometimes taking a chance, taking a chance can be scary. It could be very small, or it can be life-changing. Even when you have all the facts, sometimes even when you know you have to take that move, it's scary to do. But you know what? That's what God's there for. Bring it to him. Cast your burdens on him and watch the miracles that he'll do in front of you and for you. So as a leader, as at work, as a leader at work, I've got to be careful of that as well. There's some days where I'm upset. And there's some days where I get aggravated. There's some days I don't, we get frustrated of what's going on. We sometimes get inundated with more than enough work. But at the same time, I try not to show that disappointment. I try not to show that frustration. I try to keep people on track of what needs to be done. That's just what we do, okay? A lot of times a leader or a boss or a supervisor doesn't want negative Nancy talking and leading his people, okay? They want someone that can produce results. And that's what we got to try to do. The 10 spies came in, were negative Nancy's. You have 2 of them. The other 2 were, they wanted results. They knew what they were focused on, the evidence of God's blessing, not the people. They were like, look at these grapes. Look at these pomegranates. Look at these figs. Man, there's so much land over there. It's overflowing with milk and honey. Let's go. They were ready to rock and roll. All right, so the fruit of the land, the promise, it could not overcome their fear. That was the biggest thing. The fear is what kept them in the desert for another 40 years. Has fear kept you in the desert? Has it kept you in spiritual stagnation? Something to think about. What is it that you're afraid of? What changes could possibly take place in your life for the better? Something to think about. All right, summarize. Believers can depend on God to instruct them in the task he has for them. Yes, amen. If God's got a task for you, if God's got a plan for you, he's not going to sit there and open up the door and kick you through it. He is going to walk with you, and he's going to be with you to the end. We saw last week where Moses got so fed up, he was like, hey, go ahead and kill me if I find favor with you. He was at that breaking point, but God was not going to give up on Moses. God was not going to give up on the plan that he had started from the beginning. It's the same way with you. God's not going to give up on you. He's not going to put you on a path and abandon you to that path. He's going to be there with you the whole time. Second point, obedience to God includes understanding what he is calling us to do. Correct. If we know what we're supposed to do and we know what God's called us to do, nothing's going to keep us from that path. So make sure that you're praying to God that what you're doing is of his accord. Okay. Last point, believers can face obstacles with faith, knowing God is with them. Yes. If God is going to bless me and pull me out of the valleys in the past, there's no way that he intends to abandon me to another valley in the future. I trust when I look at my blessings and I count my blessings and I go forward to the unknown, I can look back and clearly see where God has had my back the whole time. He has been leading me. He's been carrying me, and He has been blessing me. He's been in my presence. There's no reason to think tomorrow that He's going to just disappear, walk away from me, and say, "Look, you're on your own." There's nothing to support that thought. That's just me facing fear of my own and not clinging to Him like I should. Okay. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you dialing in for another one of our Sunday school series. I really enjoyed this series, and I hope that this lesson really speaks to you in regards to facing the unknown, facing your fears, and moving forward. As a church family, as a believer, it's important for us to take those times, because sometimes those seasons roll around that we do have the unknown that we have to face either individually or together as a church family. And as we move forward, we got to just trust God. He has blessed us with plenty before. He's going to continue to bless us if we let Him. Okay? As always, if you would, like and subscribe to the channel. That way, every time we make a video, you'll be notified when that video posts. We'd love to have you here at Webb Baptist for our Wednesday night meetings and dinners. We have a place for you and all the children that you may have, or your grandchildren, okay? Your neighbor's kids, bring them. And we also meet Sunday morning at 9:15 for our Sunday School Connect groups. And then we go in for the hour worship in the church. And we'd love to have you here as our honored guest. If you can't make it to Webb Baptist, by all means, find you a Bible-based church, get plugged in, and find out what God has in store for you. Your fear may be going into church. Your fear may be starting off some new direction with another church or going to church in general. That's understandable. It can be intimidating. I've been there several times in my life. But you know what? At the end of the day, if God's calling you to be a part of a church family, it will be a blessing beyond measure. Believe in that. I do, because I know it to be true. Okay? Until next time, take care and God bless.